breaking news overnight.
New details surrounding a crime scene in the middle of a Daytona Beach neighborhood. Overnight, police confirmed a woman was shot and killed. Her husband badly hurt after a murder and attempted suicide. It happened after 6:30 last night at a home along Fulton Street. That's not far from North Street and George W. Ingram Boulevard. News 6's Ezzy Castro joins us live from the Daytona Beach Police headquarters. And Ezzy, police say it all started with a fight.
What happens when a private marital dispute suddenly turns into a homicide investigation? What would investigators discover if the final moments of a victim's life unfolded in front of the very people who came to protect her? And how did a domestic argument inside a home on Fulton Street in Daytona Beach escalate so quickly that it ended with a fatal gunshot? On October 19, 2023, police responded to reports of a shooting at a residence in Daytona Beach, Florida. Inside the home, officers found 34-year-old Shantae Adkins with a fatal gunshot wound near the front door. In the yard outside, her husband, Chantel Adkins, was injured from a gunshot wound to his shoulder. Witnesses at the scene included Shantae's parents, who had arrived only minutes earlier after their daughter called them for help during a domestic argument. Investigators soon realized that the events of that evening were the result of escalating conflicts that had begun earlier that same day. Here we deliver clear, factual, and up-to-date true crime stories. Subscribe and turn on notifications to stay informed on the latest cases and investigations. At approximately 6:30 p.m., officers from the Daytona Beach Police Department were dispatched to a residence on the 500 block of Fulton Street after receiving reports of gunfire. When officers arrived, they located a male individual in the front yard suffering from a gunshot wound. The individual was later identified as Chantel Adkins, the homeowner. He was transported to a hospital for medical treatment. Inside the residence, officers discovered Shantae Adkins, who had sustained a gunshot wound near the front entrance of the home. She was pronounced dead at the scene. A rifle was recovered at the location. Witnesses present included the victim's parents, who told investigators they had arrived at the home shortly before the shooting occurred. According to their initial statements, their daughter had asked them to come to the house because she was involved in a serious argument with her husband. The discovery of the weapon, the positions of the individuals involved, and the presence of eyewitnesses immediately established the framework of the investigation. However, investigators still needed to determine the events that led to the shooting. Shantae Adkins lived in Daytona Beach with her husband, Chantel Adkins. The couple shared a residence on Fulton Street. According to information gathered during the investigation, Shantae maintained a close relationship with her parents. They remained actively involved in her life and were frequently contacted during personal or family matters. Neighbors described the couple as generally private. However, investigators later learned that the relationship had been experiencing increasing conflict. Disagreements involving trust, communication, and lifestyle issues had reportedly occurred within the marriage. These tensions did not initially involve law enforcement, but they became relevant as detectives attempted to determine the circumstances that led to the fatal incident. By examining events earlier in the day, investigators began identifying several factors that contributed to the argument on October 19. Crime scene technicians conducted a detailed forensic examination of the residence. Investigators documented the location of blood evidence near the front entrance of the house. The position of the victim suggested that she was near the doorway at the time the shot was fired. Ballistics testing was performed on the rifle recovered at the scene. The analysis later confirmed that the weapon fired the round responsible for the fatal injury. Medical examiners determined that Shantae Adkins died from a gunshot wound to the neck. Trajectory analysis indicated that the shot had been fired from inside the residence toward the front doorway. These findings supported witness statements indicating that the victim had been moving toward the exit when the shot occurred. For investigators, the forensic evidence established the physical sequence of the shooting. The next step involved determining the events that led to the confrontation. Interviews with family members revealed that multiple disagreements had taken place earlier that same day. According to statements later presented in court, Shantae had discovered messages on her husband's Apple Watch that suggested he had been communicating with another woman. After seeing the messages, she reportedly informed her mother about the situation and stated that she was considering ending the marriage. Another dispute occurred involving a motorcycle belonging to Shantae. Investigators later learned that Chantel had allegedly taken the motorcycle and left the residence while intoxicated earlier that day. These issues intensified the argument between the couple. Throughout the day, the disagreement continued to escalate. Eventually, Shantae decided to contact her parents and ask them to come to the house. Detectives collected digital records from electronic devices connected to the case. Call logs confirmed that Shantae had contacted her parents shortly before the shooting. The records indicated that she asked them to come to the residence to help calm the situation. Investigators also reviewed messages recovered from the Apple Watch that had triggered the earlier argument. These messages became part of the investigative timeline because they helped explain the origin of the dispute. Digital timestamps also confirmed when Shantae placed the call to her parents and when they arrived at the house. This information allowed investigators to construct a detailed timeline during the final hour before the shooting. In the late afternoon and early evening, the disagreement between the couple continued. Shantae confronted her husband regarding the messages and the motorcycle incident. The discussion developed into a prolonged argument. Concerned about the situation, she contacted her parents and requested their assistance. Her parents arrived at the residence shortly after the call. Their intention was to help calm the dispute and possibly take her daughter away from the situation. However, the arrival of additional people inside the house did not resolve the conflict. Instead, the confrontation continued. Within minutes, the situation escalated further. After receiving medical treatment, Chantel Adkins became the primary suspect in the investigation. Detectives interviewed Shantae's parents, who were eyewitnesses to the incident. According to their statements, the confrontation continued after they arrived at the home. At some point during the interaction, Chantel retrieved a rifle. The parents reported that they began escorting their daughter toward the front door. As they approached the exit, a shot was fired. Investigators also documented statements indicating that Chantel threatened the parents after the shooting occurred. These statements became significant pieces of evidence during the investigation. The final day of Shantae Adkins' life involved several events that investigators later identified as contributing factors in the case. Earlier in the day, Shantae discovered messages suggesting her husband had been communicating with another woman. Later, a separate dispute occurred involving the use of her motorcycle. The arguments continued throughout the day. By the evening, Shantae contacted her parents and asked them to come to the home. When they arrived, they attempted to remove her from the argument. As the three individuals moved toward the front door, Chantel retrieved a rifle from inside the residence. He then fired a shot that struck Shantae in the neck as she attempted to leave the home with her parents. During the incident, her father attempted to flee the residence and sustained a broken leg while running from the scene. After firing the weapon, Chantel Adkins shot himself in the shoulder. Police officers later found him outside the home and transported him to a hospital. Following the investigation, authorities formally charged Chantel Adkins with multiple criminal offenses. The charges included first-degree murder with a firearm, 2 counts of aggravated assault. The murder charge related to the fatal shooting of Shantae Adkins. The aggravated assault charges were connected to the threats made toward the victim's parents. Law enforcement investigators compiled evidence, including witness testimony, forensic analysis, and digital records. This information formed the basis of the prosecution's case. The case proceeded to trial in Volusia County, Florida. Prosecutors presented evidence including testimony from Shantae's parents, forensic ballistics, and digital communications connected to the argument. The trial lasted 2 days. After the presentation of evidence and closing arguments, the jury began deliberating. The jury returned a verdict after approximately 17 minutes of deliberation. Chantel Adkins was found guilty of first-degree murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault. Under Florida law, a conviction for first-degree murder carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison. Following the conviction, the case concluded with the expectation that Chantel Adkins would receive a life sentence. The homicide investigation was conducted by the Daytona Beach Police Department. Prosecutors from the 7th Judicial Circuit handled the case in court. For Shantae's family, the case involved not only the loss of a family member, but also direct involvement as witnesses to the crime. Her father, who sustained a broken leg during the incident, later recovered after receiving medical treatment. The investigation documented a series of events that occurred over the course of a single day, beginning with a domestic dispute and ending with a fatal shooting inside a private residence in Daytona Beach. Through witness testimony, forensic analysis, and digital evidence, investigators reconstructed the sequence of events that led to the homicide.